Today's video is an absolute doozy. Today we're talking about how aperture affects your depth of field. Have you ever wondered how people get those really, what's a good word, a buttery kind of photos where the person is in like absolute crisp focus and then the background's so blurred you can't even see what's going on? That's depth of field. So kind of think of focusing along sort of like a plane. So one end has things that are really, really close. So like if you're shooting flowers, and then all the way on the other end of the focus plane is say mountains. The mountains that are in the background behind the flowers. You got that picture in your head? That's kind of how focus works. And then as you turn your focus ring all the way down, your focus point moves from the flowers all the way down, and then the mountains become in focus. That's a very basic way to understand how focus works. And now how depth of field works in that is depth of field is how much of each point along this focus plane is in focus. And that comes down to your aperture. I mentioned in a video before that your aperture is like the little ring that sits in front of your sensor and controls how much light, so how much of your available light gets back to that sensor and hits the sensor, which then creates an image. Are you still with me? It's getting good. So just to recap, a small aperture number, say like 1.4 or 2.8, actually means that the aperture ring is opened up wider. So the smaller the number, the wider the ring, meaning that there's more light getting through to the sensor. The bigger the number, say like 22, means there's just a really, really small hole and not a lot of light is getting through. If you were in daylight, super duper sunny, you'd have a bigger number because you want to close off the sensor to light, otherwise your image would be overexposed. If you're in really dark conditions, what you want to do is open up that aperture really wide and let in all the possible light. Even if there's not a lot, you want to let in as much as possible for that camera sensor to read, meaning that your image is brighter. Still with me? Let's keep going. This one's worth it, trust me, hang in there. So with that being said, as you increase your aperture number, going from 2.8 to 4 to 5.6, all the way up through 22, as you increase that number, what you're doing is making the range at which a point is in focus bigger. So right in front of me, I'm filming in an f2.8. That's a pretty wide open aperture. That means when I'm on manual focus, I don't have a lot of room to move forward or backwards before I'm out of focus. Now, if you watched my video yesterday on autofocus versus manual focus, you'll see what happens when I do move out of that really small window of focus. Because I'm on that really wide open aperture, as soon as I take a step forward, the image is blurry. So you can't even use that. As soon as I take one step backwards from the point that I've focused in, my image is unusable. Completely out of focus. Throw that one in the bin. But as soon as I move back into my point that I've intentionally focused on, the image is sharp again. Now, when I turn up my aperture, meaning that I'm closing the hole down, one, I'll need more light to keep my image exposed, and two, I'll be able to move a lot more forward or backwards before I fall out of focus. So I'm just gonna bump up my lighting. So I've just really cranked up my lighting and my image is so overexposed because I have that aperture open so wide. So now I'll close down my aperture. My aperture is now at f9. So we've gone from f2.8 to f9. Now if I do the same demonstration where I move forward and backwards, you'll be able to see that as I move forward, I'm in focus for a lot longer than if I was to do it with a 2.8 aperture. So this is my focus point right here. If I move forward slowly, as I move, you'll see me fall out of focus eventually, but it's a lot slower as compared to when we had a lower aperture. It's the same thing if I move backwards. Even back here, this image is still usable. It's not ideal, but it's still usable. So I hope that visual example helped. I'm just gonna adjust my aperture back down to 2.8 so I can get that really shallow and nice depth of field back, and so I'm also not blinded by this light. So knowing the science behind how aperture and depth of field work together will really help you if you're shooting in changing lighting conditions. So as the light around you changes, you may have to adjust your aperture to adapt to the light so that you get a perfectly exposed image. In controllable lighting situations like this one here, where I have a key light, which is an Aperture 120D, straight on my face, and I've blocked out a lot of the other available light from my window this way, I'm able to control my aperture by changing how much light I provide to the camera sensor. Anywho, I think that's enough confusing concepts for this video. You know what? See you guys tomorrow. Fuck, I'm nearly blinded. Whoa. I'm doing too much pre-production and making sure this runs too smoothly to have any bloopers. It's killing me. Here for the laugh, aren't we? Thanks for coming to my TED Talk.